Sie hören eine weitere Ausgabe von Crop FM Spezial. Diesmal mit einem ausführlichen Gespräch mit dem amerikanischen Autor und Contactee Stan Romanek. Das gesamte Gespräch liegt auch in einer deutschen Übersetzung vor, die mit dem Archiveintrag verlinkt ist. Mein Dank geht an Natascha Jacek, die das Interview transkribiert und auch den Erstkontakt mit Stan Romanek hergestellt hat. Der am 28. Juni 1962 in Denver, Colorado geborene Autor und Vortragende Stan Romanek hat sich seit seiner ersten UFO-Sichtung im Dezember 2000 zu einem Sprachrohr des sogenannten Disclosure Movements entwickelt und sein ganzes Leben dreht sich mittlerweile um die Weitergabe von Informationen rund um seine mutmaßlichen Kontakte zu derzeit noch unbekannten, doch offenbar hochintelligenten Lebensformen. Der Strang an Ereignissen rund um den Kontakt zieht sich dem Anschein nach bis in die Kindheit Romaneks. Ebenfalls Teil der Familiengeschichte sind Erzählungen seines Vaters, der während seiner Dienstzeit in der US Air Force Zeuge von unidentifizierten Objekten über atomaren Raketenanlagen geworden sein soll. Nach seinen ersten Sichtungen im Jahr 2000 wurde Romanek mehrfach Opfer unfreiwilliger Entführungen von verschiedensten Gruppen. Er kann sich teilweise durch Regressionstherapie unterstützt an viele Details dieser Erfahrungen erinnern. Erfahrungen, die auch zahlreiche physische Spuren hinterlassen haben und somit eigentlich kein rein psychologisches Phänomen im klassischen Sinne sein können. Romanek gelang es auch, eine Menge an Videomaterial zu sammeln. Eines davon zeigt ein ca. 1,20 Meter großes Wesen, das nachts von draußen durch ein Fenster ins Haus blickt. Jeff Packman versuchte sein Anliegen zur Einrichtung einer Kommission für extraterrestrische Angelegenheiten in Colorado Springs mit einem Film des Kontaktlers Stan Romanek zu untermauern. Leider vergeblich. Seine ungewöhnlichen Erfahrungen und daraus gewonnenen Einsichten hielt Romanek im Buch Messages fest, das 2009 im Llewellyn Verlag erschienen ist. Auf seiner Website findet sich ebenfalls eine umfangreiche Sammlung an Material, das teilweise im Interview referenziert wird. Darunter auch das mutmaßliche Alien-Video. Romanek ist nach eigenen Angaben auch heftigen Repressalien ausgesetzt und wurde in den letzten Jahren mehrmals tätig angegriffen. Doch von all diesem Unbill wenig beeindruckt, berichtet Romanek weiter über seine Erfahrungen. Im nun folgenden 2 Stunden dauernden Interview gibt Stan Romanek nicht nur einen sehr guten Überblick der Ereignisse, sondern spricht auch über faszinierende Details seiner sehr ungewöhnlichen Begegnungen mit dem Unbekannten. Ich wünsche viel Vergnügen.
FM. Glaubt, was ihr wollt.
With me this evening is Stan Romanek from the USA. It's 6 o'clock here in the evening, but it's 10 o'clock where you are, Stan. Is that correct?
Yes,
So
that's correct.
What's the region where you're located in right now?
I live actually in Colorado, so it's mountain time here.
Yeah.
Mountain time U.S. here.
All right, so
Yes,
this is
sir.
a long-distance interview, but I'm very pleased to do it with you tonight, or this morning on your side of the world.
On my end, yes.
On your end. Since the story that began, I think your story really kicked in about 10 years ago. And it's quite astonishing. I followed it in the last couple of years, especially also the initiative that Jeff Peckman tried to pitch, also using the evidence that you provided, so on and so forth. And of course, you are the cameraman, if you will, or the one who caught this alleged alien being on camera, which is really a very astonishing and in a way also very funny piece of footage.
Yes.
Because funny because when I looked at it the other day, I had to laugh almost because what is shown here is so bizarre. I mean, to imagine that someone travels from who knows where, maybe not even within this reality or realm, and then behaves like this, that's actually exactly as what I would expect of this phenomenon that is fooling us for decades now. And Stan, why don't we start off with, can you give a chronological description of your story, of what happened to you? Just a brief overview, so to say, and then we go into details later.
Sure. Well, for me, it really started in 2000. I had some strange things happen when I was a child. I grew up in the Air Force, in the U.S. military. My father was in the Air Force most of his life, and he worked on nuclear missiles. He was involved in missile bases. Well, in 2000, at the time I was dating a woman from Nebraska, and I lived in Colorado. And we had this long-distance relationship going on, and I wanted to entice her to come visit me, and I thought best way to do that is videotape the beautiful scenery in Colorado, the mountains and the skyline of Denver, and, just send her some chocolates and a little care package and see if I could get her to come visit me. I actually drove up the back roads to go to a tourist spot just west of Denver, and I noticed some cars had pulled off to the side of the road, and people were looking at something above some power lines that were off to the left of me. When I looked to see what they were looking at, I saw a metallic object hovering about 60 feet above these power lines. At first, I thought it was some weird hot air balloon, and then I realized it was a UFO. And I had my video camera with me, and I didn't really believe in this stuff. I was a pretty big skeptic at the time, and I kept saying to myself, "Man, I don't believe what I'm seeing, and people aren't going to believe me. I better start videotaping this object." So that's what I did. I got my video camera out. I started videotaping this object, and it seemed to notice me in just faster than a blink of an eye. As soon as I rolled down the window to videotape this UFO, it shot straight up in the air and stopped at about maybe 2,000 feet. Just stopped. And that's when this all started.
So that's a very pretty intensive sighting. And prior to that, you didn't have any relation to this phenomenon, and you weren't interested at all, or did you follow it from,
Not at all. Not at all. There was a story. My father was involved, like I said, with nuclear bases, missile bases, and he was stationed in North Dakota. And North Dakota has two very large missile bases there, Grand Forks and Minot, North Dakota. And my father worked between both. And in 1968, I was 5 years old at the time. They had a bunch of they have problems with UFOs messing with the missiles, and they still do to this day, but especially in the late 60s, early 70s. And there was an incident my father was involved with where a UFO came down and actually activated one of the missiles. And they followed this UFO to our small town of Northwood, North Dakota. And they sent a detail with my father to surround this water tower where this UFO was hovering above the water tower. Now that's kind of been that story's been in my family, when I was a little kid, and I remember this very strange lady showing up throughout my life. If I look back, she probably wasn't human. But other than that, I really didn't believe in this phenomenon. I didn't believe in ghosts. I didn't believe in UFOs. I didn't believe in any of this stuff. I thought it was just ridiculous. But now I seem to be the poster child for the strange and unusual.
Yeah, it almost seems. So that's very interesting, the account that your father gave. So this is a case where the missiles weren't turned off, but in fact turned on.
Yeah, they were turned on. They were activated.
Okay, because of course, you surely know that late September this year, there was this revelation by Air Force personnel in the Washington Press Club about those objects being seen when the arsenal, the nuclear missiles deactivated, but that's very interesting to hear that in this case it was the other way around. Now, you mentioned a strange lady. Can you tell me a bit more about her?
Well, when I was 5 years old at the time, and this strange woman, I remember I was outside playing, and this strange, very attractive but unusually looking, very thin, just really extremely blonde hair, huge Oriental, except they weren't Oriental. They were very slanted, almond-shaped, blue eyes. Came up to me when I was a child and told me that I was very special and I had something very important to do when I grew up. And I remember my mother came out, saw this woman talking to me, and I think she got a little concerned and came out and started yelling my name to come into the house, and as soon as she did this strange woman walked away. Now, what I remember of this woman, her eyes were so blue they were almost violet, and I remember she was showing me a marble. What I thought was a marble, the only trouble is, looking back, I remember she only had 3 fingers, and this marble was floating approximately a quarter inch off the palm of her hand. Now, when you're a child, you don't really put 2 and 2 together. You don't really think about things until something happens later in life, and that's what happened to me. Well, this woman showed up again. We moved. My father, I was originally born in Denver, Colorado. We moved when I was just a baby to North Dakota, where my father was stationed there at the base. And we moved to Cheyenne, Wyoming, where there was another base, Air Force base, that my father was stationed at. I remember this same woman showed up again. this time she approached my parents, and I think we were Christmas shopping or shopping for Christmas presents or something at the time. And I was the last to get into the car, and she came up and she ruffled my hair and started talking to my parents. And I think I got in trouble. I was doing something bad or naughty. And, my parents were joking around about me. And I remember this woman says, well, you have nice children. If you don't want, pointing to me, if you don't want him, we'll take him. And I remember my mother paused for a second, joking, of course, but she paused for a second, and it worried me because I thought my parents were going to give me away. And she goes, nah, I think we'll keep him.
Okay.
So
this woman showed up more than once in your life, yeah?
Yes, and then she showed up the last time when I moved back to Denver. So I don't know who she was, but that's just part of the enigma of these experiences. I mean, if I track it back, I can track it back all the way to when I was at least 5 years old.
And how old were you when you saw her the last time?
The last time I was about 11 years old, and I was playing in a park just behind our house, and there was nobody up there. And it was a summer day, and I was swinging on a swing, and I remember this woman walked up the path towards me, and she sat a few swings down from me. And she was asking me really strange questions like, how are they treating you? And are you eating healthy? And how have you been? Are you doing well in school? And when you're 10, 11 years old, those questions are really bizarre coming from a person you don't know. And I remember looking up at her, and she said, we're part of you, you're part of us. And I looked at her, and what I remembered was she said that without her mouth moving. I remember her talking, and her mouth wasn't moving. And it scared me so bad, I ran all the way home and didn't go up to that park for almost the rest of the summer.
Unbelievable. So the whole thing started actually at a fairly young age, if you want to draw the connection between the encounters with this strange lady, indeed a very strange lady, and whatever happened later on. Now, fast forwarding to around 2000, that was also the time after this encounter that you filmed, and I think a lot of the footage is available online on your website, including the very funny, strange little alien being that glimpsed through your window. But after this, really, you have to see it, I think. So after you filmed this first UFO encounter that you had, while trying to make, a kind of a greeting card, electronic greeting card for your girlfriend, you had some also close encounters and abduction experiences?
I did. I started, it was just the beginning. I started seeing more UFOs. I started having bizarre, what they call high strangeness, bizarre things started happening. I seemed to be affected electromagnetically. I couldn't wear watches anymore. My watches wouldn't work. I couldn't, credit cards wouldn't work anymore. I'd go into, I'd be going down the street and street lights would shut off, just go off. And it's, all this stuff is documented. And then I had another major UFO sighting. I had some business in the eastern part of the United States, and I picked up my girlfriend, who's now my wife. But I picked up my wife and my best friend, and we drove to Pennsylvania, where I had some business. And on the way back, my friend was the first to notice something up in the sky, and then, my girlfriend. And it was a UFO. It was a huge disc-shaped UFO that was literally just right above us. And everybody could see it, and it followed us through 2.5 states. And by then, I was pretty terrified. I didn't know what to think. I started becoming paranoid. Why were these things following me? And then it kind of died down for a little bit. And then 2001, those 3 months, September, October, November, I started having major sightings, and I had my first abduction experience, September 21st. And whatever these things are, whoever they are, they didn't seem to care if they were... I mean, I had a UFO beam my van in the middle of a suburb of Denver, Colorado during rush hour. Hundreds, if not thousands of people saw this object. And it was right after another incident where I had a UFO above my work. And I had my first abduction experience in September 21st.
But these abilities or these effects that you started to have on electronic equipment, these effects kicked in before you had the first abduction experience that you can remember?
Shortly after my first sighting, they started happening.
Do you think there's a relation?
And there's some...
I mean, just by seeing...
I wonder.
Yeah. Because, I mean, you know, if you get abducted, whatever that means and whatever happens really happens during an abduction, I mean, all kind of stuff could, of course, happen. And, yeah, why not?
Exactly.
But, as you say, this was before the first consciously remembered experience. So that's very intriguing to me.
There is a theory that I had an abduction experience shortly after the UFO, the first UFO that I videotaped. But I don't remember, so I can't tell you for sure. All I know is another bizarre thing started to happen. I love animals. I love nature. I'm very conscious about recycling things, and I had never intentionally injured an animal, hit a bird, hit an animal with my car, anything. In fact, if a squirrel, jumps out in front of me while I'm driving down the road, I'd rather crash the car. My wife always makes fun of me. But for some reason, after that first UFO, it started when I was driving in a parking lot of a mall. We were going to see a movie, and a bird flew right into the windshield, and I was only doing about 20 miles an hour. And I was with some friends, and this bird flew overhead, but then all of a sudden it looked like it got confused and it slammed right into the windshield of my car. And this started happening over and over and over again, and there were times where I'd be driving down the road, and the whole flock of birds would fly overhead and look like they got disoriented and head right for the van. We were picking birds out of my windshield wipers. And times I'd be sitting at my office window, and a bird would fly into my office window, and that happened for a few years before it finally died down. So whatever happened to me, it seemed to affect something. I can't tell you what.
Yeah. That remembers me of a bat that once flew into my sleeping room, and then when I tried to get out the bat, another one flew in. And I was... Oh, geez. Yeah, that was really strange. It was after a show, but, But, I mean, such things can happen, and that happened once to me. It was a funny night trying to get those bats out of my flat. But
I can only imagine.
Yes. They're wonderful animals, and I was kind of, I'd like to keep them, but, you can't keep a bat. So
they're very good for the environment, too.
Yeah. They're fantastic. But that happened to you all the time, you say, for how long?
Well, it's still periodically weird stuff still happens. I mean, my case continues. It doesn't stop. It doesn't go away. And what makes my case so different is whatever's going on, they want people to know about it. Most of the stuff that happens only seems to happen when there's a lot of people around, including, world news organizations come to visit, and all this stuff happens. The top investigators in the world, all this stuff happens. I've got some of the top scientists, physicists in universities in the world that are involved in my case. And, we're all a big family now. Anybody gets involved, we're all like a big family. And everybody gets to see stuff. That's what's so amazing. And that's what makes my case different than anybody else's.
Well, I mean, there is also a case in Knittelfeld that's a town just about 100 miles from Graz, where I'm based here. And it seems to be similar, but you say that also scientists come around. I guess are these from MUFON related people?
No. These aren't. MUFON is a UFO organization, and they got involved in the beginning, and then, but with MUFON, it's like talking to the choir. I want somebody. It's better to get somebody that has credentials that's not really involved in the UFO field. So if something does happen, it's legitimate. You can't argue it. If you get somebody that already believes in UFOs and in the phenomenon, and a skeptic comes along and says, "Oh, you already believe. Who cares?" But it's harder to do that when you get a scientist that isn't really involved in the field that'll say, "Man, I was there when it happened."
And those scientists, are they willing to talk? I mean, do they?
Oh yeah.
They
There's a gentleman by the name of. Oh, you bet. I mean, that's already happened. There's the head of the physics department for the University of Nebraska. I've got one of the people involved with me is one of the top physicists. His name is Dr. Claude Swanson. He worked for the military making weapons. I've got ex-CIA people involved in my case and ex-naval intelligence people involved in my case. All these people involved in my case. But there's still, there's still going to be people that don't believe, and I understand because most of the time it's because of fear. But there's really nothing to be afraid of. We have neighbors, and I think it's amazing.
So what are these ex-CIA people interested in regarding your case?
Well, they know that the phenomenon is real. They're retired. Some of them may not be. And they just want to be involved. They're the good guys. They want this information to get out. They know how important this is to the human race. I mean, let's face it. This is the most important thing in the history of mankind, period. To know that we're not alone will change everything.
That's for
sure.
And
there's a lot of people that don't. There's a lot of people that don't want it to happen because of control. There's religious people that are afraid it's going to change everything. But I was religious, and I actually believe in God more now than I did before. And there are, like oil companies that don't want this to happen because whoever or whatever these beings are, they have technology that would help us get rid of fossil fuel, the need for fossil fuel. And people who want control this world, this secret world government that's running everything, these evil people, they don't want to lose that control. And so, they threaten people like me and they beat up people like me that are trying to get the truth out there.
But, if you think back in history, just for example, at the beginning of the 1980s, it were first and foremost also a lot of people from the CIA that I think went to join NICAP and in some cases took over UFO organizations and more or less drained them. So what makes you think that your contacts from the CIA and maybe other services are truly interested in getting this thing out? What changed their mind or,
Well, there are good guys and bad guys, in the CIA and the FBI, and the thing I'm really worried about right now is what's that called? The National, whatever that new security agency is that they have here in the United States is really scary.
You mean Homeland Security?
No. Homeland Security, yeah, that is like ultra evil. They are evil. But, the CIA, there's good and bad in all of them. And, there's good guys. We call them white lighters. There's good guys in naval intelligence, in the Navy. There's good guys in the Air Force. And it's really, interestingly enough, it's really the Navy that is really in charge of studying UFOs. The Air Force
I heard that.
To the Navy.
And isn't that interesting? I mean, there are a lot of submarine unidentified objects as well that go on with tremendous speed and so on. Now, I mean, I also happen to believe that there is, good and bad in all those services and organizations. I just wonder, I mean, I never had the pleasure, in quotes, to really be entangled with someone from the intelligence service or someone that is deeper involved with this. But yeah, I'm sure that some of those people want to get it out, and I just hope you got to the right people. So because
yeah, I'm confident that I did. First of all, they let me know up front who they were, and I don't care if you're CIA, ABC, NBC. I don't care. My message is for the human race. It doesn't matter if you're here to beat me up. My message is for them too. I can't exclude anybody. It's not fair because, maybe they're just lost. Maybe it's just their job and they don't understand what they're doing. It doesn't matter to me. It's for everybody. Supposedly there's supposed to be this catastrophic event and we go underground, and who knows if that's going to really happen or not. But I think we do have, there are good guys and bad guys up there, just like there's good guys and bad guys down here. And I'm just here to tell my story so people aren't so afraid to know that we have neighbors. And that's why I continue doing what I'm doing, because it'll change everything.
It surely will. If this is the reality that has to come out, and it finally comes out in whatever way, because I'm really curious about it, then it will change everything. Now, let's move on to your first abduction experience, which was also very bizarre. And there were people on your door and so on. Can you give a description of what happened during this first experience that you remember?
It started with I was actually an Olympic cyclist, and I was really into bicycles, and I managed I was managing for a big, huge bicycle retail company. And I was managing a store, and I just finished locking up the store about 7 o'clock at night. And my last customers had just left. They came running back, and they said, "There's something above your work. There's something above your work." I went outside thinking maybe somebody had climbed on the roof and was messing around on the roof, and I looked up, and there was this giant red blinking sphere. Must have been 30, 40 foot in diameter. Approximately maybe 500 feet above the building, and it was just stationary. And I'm thinking, if that's a big, huge balloon, how can it stay stationary in gale force winds? It was a very windy day, and anybody that lives in the Denver area knows that we get, we're right at the base of the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, so we get some pretty high winds sometimes, and this thing was just stationary. It wasn't making any noise. It just was stationary. And so we're all watching this, and again, it's during rush hour, and there were cars driving by, and I know they were seeing this thing. Well, this object eventually just flew away, and I locked up the building, and I was pretty scared. I was pretty shaken up, and I got in my car, and I was driving home. Well, on my way home, I see this blinking object coming back towards me, and I thought it had left. And I got really scared, so I hit the gas, and I was trying to get home real fast. And I noticed this object looked like it was hovering above my apartment complex. I lived in an apartment at the time. Well, I ran upstairs, got my friend and my sister. They were waiting for me. We were supposed to go out to dinner that evening. And I got my camcorder, and we ran back down and videotaped this object, and eventually it just kind of disappeared. Well, we actually never made it out to dinner, but my friend left about 11 o'clock at night, and I went to bed with a real bad headache. I was woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning by somebody knocking very loudly on the door. First thing I thought was maybe my friend ran out of gas and he had to walk back, or maybe it was a neighbor and they were drunk, or maybe they left the keys out, or who knows what. I went to go answer the door. By the time I got there, my sister had already answered the door. Now, if I walk down the hall, I have a really good view of the door, and there were 3 people standing outside, and my sister was up against the wall there with this kind of dazed look on her face, almost like she was still asleep, and she was looking at the ceiling. And I'm thinking, what in the world? I thought they were young teenagers because they were a little bit smaller than my sister. My sister's like, what is she, like 4'6" or something like that. And she's fairly short. And as I got closer to these people, I'm thinking, why in the world are they wearing costumes, and why are they wearing bizarre masks? I thought they were some kind of mask, and the first thing I thought is, oh my gosh, these guys are going to try to rob us. I mean, why else would they be wearing masks, other than they wanted to rob us? So I'm screaming at my sister not to let them in, and she just, like she was still asleep, she just ignored me. Well, there were, like I said, there were three. There was a female and two males, which is not typical of what you hear about extraterrestrials or aliens or ETs. Most of the people, when you talk to them, they talk about these gray-looking little guys with big black eyes, and I've seen those too, but in this case, they looked almost human, except their heads were extremely large. They were extremely skinny. In fact, I remember the female, and you could tell she was a female. She had female body parts, which is not typical of what you hear. But I remember she walked in, pushed my sister aside, and I'm looking at her thinking, this can't be a costume. This can't be a mask. I'm watching her facial features move. And her neck was so skinny, I'm wondering how she could hold up her head with such a skinny neck. Well, I was screaming inside, but for whatever reason, it wasn't coming out. And I remember she grabbed my wrist, and a thought popped into my head. And unless it happens to you, it's really hard to explain, but she was basically saying, it's okay, you're going to be okay, calm down. Well, I wasn't going to be okay. I didn't put that thought in my head, and I completely flipped out. Now, we lived in a second-story apartment, so there was a male on either side, and the female had me by the wrist and was, taking me out to the balcony. I must have panicked enough that I came out of whatever trance I was in, and I grabbed one of the males. I was going to throw him off the balcony, and I remember he had this look of surprise on his face, and I remember their eyes were really blue, almost violet eyes, just like the woman from my childhood. And I felt a light tap on the back of my neck, and I woke up somewhere else.
And this happened on September the 20th, 2001?
Well, technically it's 21st. So the 20th is when I had the UFO over my work, and then, 2 o'clock in the morning it'd be the 21st.
And this depiction that can be seen on your website, did you draw that yourself from memory?
I tried. I was a commercial artist there for a while. I tried to draw it, but for some reason I can't get it right. So I had somebody help me with that drawing, and honestly, even that drawing's not correct. Maybe one of these days I'll be able to find a real good artist that'll help me get it just right, but that's as close as I could. These beings are regal. They're very elegant. They're very, what's the word? Regal. I don't know how else to explain it. They have a purpose in the way they walk. They don't move like us. They don't talk like us. They can communicate large volumes of information in just a thought. I mean, we talk linearly. We talk word after word after word. It's kind of archaic. It's amazing being involved with these beings. It really is.
How are they moving?
They're very fluid. They don't jerk like we do. They're almost, I don't know, they're very regal. Their posture is perfect. I don't know how else to explain it. And when I picked up the male, I remember he was very lightweight. He was smaller, anything small. I'm pretty husky guy. And when I picked him up, it's like, wow, this being, whatever it is very muscular. But he's different. I mean, he was built different. Just his muscular system was more dense than ours.
And do you have any other recollection of what might have been communicated or anything to you? Or what the purpose of this encounter was?
Absolutely, I remember everything. Now, here's the thing, especially in the United States. I don't know why they're trying to cover this up, but they always say the same thing, and it's so irritating. They always try to say it's sleep paralysis, this thing called sleep paralysis. When you're half awake, half asleep, your body is sometimes paralyzed so you don't hurt yourself while you're dreaming. Well, in sleep paralysis, you actually experience this thing where, your body's completely numb and you can't move and you have these weird, lucid kind of visions and things. It's very rare, and it happens to people who are are narcoleptic, which is another rare kind of disorder. But it doesn't explain what happened to people like me or to Betty and Barney Hill, which is another famous case in the United States. They were abducted while they were driving down a road in upstate New York. Travis Walton, Snowflake, Arizona, was abducted in front of many people logging. Well, he was a logger and he was logging timber. And with me, I was awake during the whole thing. I remembered everything other than being knocked out because I was going to throw that male being off the balcony. I remember waking up stuck to a wall, literally stuck to a wall. And when I kind of came to, it wasn't like I was glued. It was almost like, if you go to an amusement park and they have those centrifugal force rides that spin and they kind of stick you to the ride. That's what it felt like. And I could move my feet, I could move my hands and move my head. And I remember there were these copper pieces, round copper pieces, about a little bit bigger than my thumb, embedded in the wall every so often, and I couldn't get free. And I remember the female walked up to me, and it was a room like I had never seen before. There were no corners. Everything was molded out of the floor, out of the wall. There was nothing freestanding in this room. The lighting came from everywhere. It didn't look like it had lamps. It looked like the light was just being emitted from everywhere. It was hard to explain, except it was a real kind of dull blue light. And the female walked up and hit a panel right next to me, and it released me. And I was freaking out. I was really scared. And every time I'd have a thought, another thought would pop into my head. It's like, oh my God, where are you from? And then a thought would pop into my head, and these symbols would pop into my head. It's, how'd you get here, and what are you doing? And these things would pop into my head. Well, she turned me around, and one of the males came up, and they were doing something to my lower back that was excruciatingly painful. Like they were taking skin samples or something. It stung really bad. And I remember I felt a light tap on the back of my head again, and the pain went away. Well, after that happened, something else happened, and I woke up on a table in the middle of this room, and the female was standing there. She looked me directly in the eye, tilted her head, and a rush of thought literally knocked me off the table. That's the best way I can describe it. All these symbols, all these views of things, these catastrophic events were happening, like, winds so strong they're blowing the pavement off the earth. They're, blowing roads off the earth, fires and all this horrible stuff. And I just almost had a nervous breakdown at that point. And I kept thinking, when's this going to happen? When's this going to happen? Is this going to happen? What's going to happen? Well, she never really kind of gave me any indication other than these symbols. Well, I eventually woke up in my bedroom that next morning. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I remembered everything, but my brain, because I didn't believe it, my brain just said, you just had a bad nightmare. That's what it's going to be. If like it or not, you just had a bad nightmare. I went to go make some breakfast, and my sister asked me, what happened to your back? I said, huh? She goes, what happened to your back? I didn't feel any pain. I didn't feel anything other than when I felt with my hand, I had these holes where they did the scoop marks. And all the hair was rubbed off my wrists, and I had these open wounds. You can see that on the website, too. So there's all kinds of evidence that something happened. It just went crazy from there.
It went crazy from there, as if that wasn't crazy enough. But
it got. I tell you, it got more bizarre. It got really bizarre when I did my first regression.
Yeah, tell me about what happened. What did you remember?
Well, I was really having a hard time with this. I wanted to be crazy. It would have been easier for me to accept the fact that I was crazy than, the reality that this was really happening. Well, it didn't look like it was going to end up that way. I needed help, and this was when I was involved with MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and they suggested, hey, we might be able to help you. Why don't you go get a hypnotic regression? Sometimes that can help you bring stuff out and help you deal with it. I was a little concerned at first, but I was talked into it, and that's what I did. I went and got a hypnotic regression. What people have to understand is I'm severely dyslexic. Even though I'm a best-selling author, I can't spell worth a darn, and I'm very, very bad at math. So I've got maybe a fourth grade level math ability. Terrible at math. I'm embarrassed. I have to ask my stepkids how to do long division just because I was never taught how to do it growing up. But during the regression, the hypnotherapist says, well, do you remember anything? I said, yeah, I have these symbols that they gave me, these weird symbols. Well, she gave me a piece of paper, and under hypnotic regression, I started writing this stuff down. And within about 20 seconds, I wrote this very long page of these very complex physics equations. And one of them ended up being an electron description of an element that we didn't have at the time. And when I wrote this down and I came out of the hypnotic state that I was in, I fell apart. I started crying like a baby because I was terrified. And I thought these symbols that I drew down were nonsense. But the physicist, her mouth dropped, and her eyes were huge, and she couldn't believe what just happened. They sent it off to the University of Nebraska, and the physics department, the guy there, the head of the physics department, immediately called and said, oh my God, this is amazing. What is this stuff? And then I started, after that regression, I started writing these weird equations in my sleep with, witnesses. Nobody knows why. And then eventually that stopped, and some of these equations were known, some of them aren't. Some of them are talking about building wormholes and zero-point energy. Some of them are talking about new elements that we didn't have at the time. Just crazy stuff, and it's all documented.
So are these equations online too on your website? Or
Yes.
All right.
You bet. You can go on the website and see what I wrote down. And what's interesting, I remember them telling me that something very important was going to happen. And I thought it was related to all this catastrophic stuff, and they didn't seem to ever want to tell me if it was or it wasn't. But they gave me some symbols, some dots. Well, it was a astronomer from Glasgow, Ireland, that actually figured out the dots was an alignment of planets, and he came up with a date. So the date was, I think, November 21st, 2012 was the date for this important event, whatever it is.
So this important event on November 2012, you say, and this was related to those catastrophic scenes that you have seen?
I'm not sure it was. There's a lot of debate and a lot of people arguing about this 2012 thing. I'm not sure I believe in that. It started with the Mayan. This one English guy started spreading rumors about the Mayan calendar, but if you talk to the Mayan elders today, they say that, this guy was crazy. I don't know if I believe in the doomsday scenario. I think there is a shift that's happening, and I think maybe it might be contact. I'm not sure. I don't know.
So these elements that you referred to that were included in your equations or could be read out of your equations, which elements were they? Unobtainium?
Well, there was just one element. It was element 115. And in my equation, I forget when the regression was done, but I've got a news article 2 years later from one of the scientists that a Russian and a German scientist finally invented element 115. At the time, they didn't even have the electron structure for it. They didn't really have the equation for it. And I had it apparently 2 years prior.
That's really fascinating.
Bizarre stuff.
All right. Now, and on the website, one can also see those scars that would be very visible in blacklight, as I understand.
Yeah, one of the when this happened, when this abduction thing happened, we called MUFON right away, and they, luckily MUFON International back then, they were really good. They had some good people there. They sent their top people over right away to do the investigation, and they knew what happened. They calmed me down and they said, look, if you've been taken and you have these scoop marks, which is typical of an abduction experience, sometimes they'll fluoresce under black light. It's like, okay. Well, I had a scrape on my knee, and I didn't know if I believed them, so we shined a black light on the scrape on my knee, and it did nothing. But as soon as I got those scoop marks or got to the wounds around my wrists, I lit up like a Christmas tree. And I tried everything. I tried, gasoline. I tried alcohol. I tried vodka even. I've tried fingernail polish remover to try to get that fluorescing off my skin, and it wasn't actually on my skin. It was under my skin, and it lasted about 90 days before it disappeared finally. And the amazing thing about those wounds, they healed within about 30 hours to nothing but barely visible scars.
Barely visible, but shining under black light.
Yeah, weird. Yeah,
weird, yeah. So let's crank up the weirdness factor a little bit. Implants. You also had implants, as I understand, after your experiences. That.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, can you tell us about
after the first experience? I didn't. I had other abduction experiences. One where I was left outside in the middle of winter time. I eventually got married and moved to Nebraska, and I had an abduction experience in Nebraska, and it was about 20 degrees outside. And I didn't have any clothes on. I was left in my backyard inside. I woke up inside this 11-foot diameter circle that, counterclockwise swirls in it, in the grass. And I had a lump on my hip. Oddly enough, a year later, I was taken again, and I had 3 puncture marks around this lump on my hip. And I don't know if those are on the website or not. You should be able to see at least something there. And then a year after that, something started poking out of my leg like a sliver or something. And I tried to get a pair of tweezers to get it out. Eventually, I went to the doctor, and they pulled it out. And when they pulled it out of my leg, I've got X-rays, and they found one deep inside by my hip bone, and this one towards the surface that they pulled out. When they pulled it out of my leg, it created this static shock that made my leg jump, which was really bizarre. The doctor had never seen that. And there was like a white fuzz all over this. I thought it was a piece of glass or something. But the doctor didn't, because it didn't show up on the X-ray like a piece of glass. Anyhow, it had this white fuzz, and as soon as the white fuzz hit the air, this stuff started melting. It started liquefying and melting. And we were watching this happen under this big magnifying glass, and he says, I've never seen that. Put it in a test tube, gave it to me, and I took it home. Well, the first thing we did was we called the researchers and the scientists involved in my case, and they said, you've got an implant, hide it because these things disappear. Well, I gave it to my wife. I told her to hide it. I didn't know where she hid it, but I went to bed that evening, and I like to listen to music before I go to bed, and I have a radio next to my bed. Well, in the middle of the night, I was woken up because this high-pitched sound was coming out of my radio, and it stopped. I went back to bed, woke up the next morning, and I told my wife about the high-pitched sound. She goes, oh, no, the implant. Well, what she did was she hid the implant in the plastic battery compartment behind the radio. And when we opened the battery compartment, the bottom of the test tube was blown out, and the implant was blown to these tiny, tiny, barely visible pieces. And first thing that researchers did was they said, we've got to save those pieces and send them off to whatever university. So we put it in a sterile jar, these tiny little pieces and the rest of the test tube. And by the time it got to the university, it had made a teaspoon of its own amino acid that they can't really identify even to this day. And then they took and they photographed it, and there's tiny little microscopic gears in these tiny little pieces, virus size, what look like computer chips, all kinds of crazy stuff in this little implant.
And I've seen images, I think they're also on your website or included in a movie or something like that, of these implants and of these structures that you just described.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're also in my book. They should be. I believe they're in my book also. So.
And your book, of course, is Messages. I think is the title. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Well, there will be a link up there to your book anyway from the archives once this show goes online. The implants, did they also give? Was there any signal that could be detected in the electromagnetic spectrum that they gave off?
That one I didn't check. I mean, I didn't know anything about implants really. I was still fairly new to this stuff. I didn't know what to expect. Just my life was turned upside down. I've had situations where I've come back with a lump in my chest, and the lump moved from my chest down to my armpit, and then all of a sudden vanished. And you put a phone up to it, and like a cell phone, and the phone would go wee, it buzzed like crazy. We've actually videotaped that. All kinds of crazy stuff.
So it looks like
really what makes us.
So that looks like there must be some signal coming off it if your phone reacts.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you're absolutely right. There is some kind of. There has to be. I mean, why would there be little gears and little computer chips and little hairs, and there's got to be a purpose for these things. I'm sure. I mean, we track animals in the wild. I mean, maybe that's what we are to them. Maybe we're just like animals are to us. Maybe we're animals to them. Or they're just tracking us and studying us. I'm not sure. I can't tell you I know anything. The more I learn, the less I know.
Yeah. And of course, detecting those signals is not always very easy. Of course, depending in which frequency band they are transmitted and so on. So do you think there are any implants in your body as we speak right now?
Oh, yes.
Oh, my God.
I know there are. I've hurt my back and had to get a CAT scan, and they found one by my spine. I've got one in my wrist, and I've got one by my hip bone that showed up on X-ray or CAT scan.
That's quite amazing. How do you deal with that? I mean, do you think that those implants influence you in any way? I mean, how can you be sure, of course, but
I can't be sure. I don't know what they're for. I don't know, I'm just speculating that they are implants. I mean, they're perfectly teardrop shaped. What would the body doesn't produce anything like that. I haven't been, especially there by my spinal cord or, by my hip bone, how would they get that deep? And, it's just speculation what they're for. I'm assuming they're to track. Are they influencing me in any way? There are theories that it's changing my DNA somehow. There are weird things that are happening with me physically. All kinds of strange stuff, but it's just speculation. I don't know for sure.
I mean, to track you, I think one wouldn't even need an implant anymore, and you would only need one. So you say you think that you have more than one implant in your body right now?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've got the x-rays to prove it. There's something in my body. I don't know what they are. Maybe they aren't implants. Maybe there's something else. Yeah. I can't tell you.
But the doctors can't tell you what they are. Do you have, are they anywhere near a position in your body where they could be removed? I mean, have you tried to?
They could be, but I'm not going to go get surgery. I don't like doctors. No way.
Mm-hmm. I can understand that for sure. Your abduction experiences, we touched on some briefly. Just to wrap that up, can you describe how this went on until the present day?
It at first I considered them abductions. I've had 2 experiences, 10 altogether, 10, maybe 11 altogether, that were more contact than they were abductions. I've had 2 experiences, though, that were about terrifying me and making me scared, and I honestly believe that might have been military involvement. Or not military per se, but black government involvement. Black ops and, secret government stuff. For whatever reason, because, and how I can tell is those particular experiences really were about trying to scare me, and I was sick for weeks afterwards. So I don't know if they used some kind of chemicals or what, but it wasn't. I've had experiences where I've had, face-to-face with these things. I mean, there was something that looked in my office window, and my wife and myself and my 2 stepdaughters went out, and this thing was in the corner of our yard and jumped over the fence when we got close. We had an incident just a week ago where my neighbor, who really isn't involved, I didn't tell her much, saw an ET looking at her over our fence when she went to let her dog out in the back. She has motion-activated spotlights that come on in the backyard, or floodlights, and she went outside, and as soon as the floodlights kicked on, this thing was surprised and kind of tried to duck down, but it was too late, and looked right at her from over our fence. And it scared her to the point where she stayed up and prayed all night long that God protect her from this thing. So,
you say there were different abductors involved in your experiences?
I have experienced at least three, maybe 4 different types of beings. I've experienced your typical, what people call the grays. I've experienced these beings that might be considered hybrids, that are, I call the possum people. They were my first abductors. They're the ones with the very big blue eyes that I remember when I was a little kid, that woman with the big blue eyes. I remember something that looks like a giant grasshopper, or, some say praying mantis, but different, a little bit different than that. And then just something that's almost light, just light. I have no idea how to explain it, just light.
Just a ball of light or something like that?
Not a ball of light. It's a form of like a person, but it's emanating light.
I see. And then you said there might also been very mundane human abductions mixed into this whole cocktail.
Twice.
What makes you think that? What was different then? Because
they were different. Because, and I'm assuming I don't really remember them like I do the other ones. The other ones were my first abduction. They knocked on the door and they were very polite. They didn't mean to hurt me, but they still took me against my will, which is kind of upsetting. But, we take animals against their will when we're trying to help them sometimes. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. There's a conflict going on within me about all this. But the 2 that I remember were really about being very scary. And I was sick, and that's what it seemed to be about. And, it just seemed different. And I heard that, the military does this, or not the military, the black government does this. They try to confuse people after they've been abducted to try to throw them off track, or to experiment on them or whatever. So maybe
to find out what happened.
That could very well be, but I can tell you right now, I've been beat up, I've been shot at, I've found wiretaps in our house, our phone's been tapped, and I am more afraid of the human element so far than I am of the ET element. And maybe I'm wrong to feel that way, but I am.
Now you mentioned it, that you have been beaten up and you have been shot at twice, which is really a very frightening thing, I would say. Can you elaborate a little bit on those harassments that you endured? And apparently you think that these are directly related to your abductions experiences. So maybe you can tell us a little bit.
Well, not necessarily my abduction experiences, but just this phenomenon, because I talk about it. Absolutely. I mean, they told me it was. We get threats constantly. We get phone threats. We get all kinds of, I mean, I have to have an armed guard whenever I do a presentation. You know, wherever I go, I speak professionally on this subject. I'm a best-selling author, and wherever I go, I have to have a guard because there's always somebody harassing us or following us or whatever. You know, our house is broken into constantly. Our phones are tapped, like I said. The first time I was beat up, I was living in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I was riding my bicycle to work, and a black unmarked SUV pulled up alongside of me, and there were 4 people, military-type people, yelling at me or saying something. I just ignored them. They were stuck behind a car at a stoplight, and I just rode off to work. Well, they somehow caught up, and they cut me off as I was about to park my bike behind my work. And they got out, and they said, "You need to keep your mouth shut." And I said, "I didn't say anything to you." And I heard them talking about the UFO stuff, and it, you know, immediately dawned on me what they were talking about. I said, you know, I can't. I mean, they won't let me. I can't stop talking about it because as soon as I do, you know, weird stuff will start to happen. And then they started trying to hit me and beat me up. Well, where I grew up in Denver was a pretty rough neighborhood, so I learned to fight, you know. And, you know, they just continued to try to beat me up. Well, I had a cable that I locked my bike up with, and I got the cable unwound from my seat, and I started swinging it, and I hit one of the guys and knocked him out, and I felt the tickle on my back, and I pretty much fell over, and I found out later I was actually tased. And as this was going on, people were driving by as this was going on, and the police were called, and the police came just as they left. Couldn't chase them because they drove into a military installation, a military base that's not too far from there. And I ended up with a broken wrist and a broken nose. I've also been shot at in front of my house. I was shot at while we were driving in Denver. I've still got the bullet hole in my windshield. I don't have enough money to get it repaired yet. And that's just part of this.
You say you told these men that were harassing you or beating you up that you can't stop talking about it or something weird happens. Can you explain that?
Yeah, which is true, you know. If I don't talk about this, the strangeness, it gets really strange. I mean, more stuff starts to happen. If I do, it's almost like I'm meant to do this. I honestly believe that I was chosen to do this. I really do. As weird as that sounds, I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up, but now this is what I want to do. This is what I do. I don't know anything else. This is what I do. And when it stops, then all hell breaks loose pretty much. You know, all the weird, I start having paranormal stuff starts to happen. You know, our house is suddenly really haunted. Lots of UFO stuff starts to happen. You know, when I continue doing what I'm doing, it calms down. It's like, you know, they're happy, I'm happy, everybody's happy, and things calm down.
Apart from those people that want to beat you up for doing it, but everyone else is happy, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, recently we've gotten a threat against my daughter, you know, so that's just, they're bullies, you know, and they're losing, and, you know, they don't know they're losing yet, but they're losing. Whatever happens, the shift is already here. People are already changing. I mean, look, just about every country in the world is opening up their files and saying this is real, including the Vatican. Let's face it, the Vatican came out a couple of years. Monsignor Balducci came out and said, yeah, it's real. I mean, the only country that I know of really that is really tight-lipped about it is the United States, maybe Australia. I don't know what it's like where you're from, but I mean, it's pretty open everywhere else. Mexico especially. England has opened their files. So,
well, in Germany and Austria, they are pretty tied up about this. There have been UFO cases. Even some of them are even noted in Richard Dolan's second volume of his book, UFOs and the National Security State. But apparently in Germany there isn't really an investigative group because they just pass on all the material to the Americans. But anyway.
That very well could be. There seems to be a close tie to Germany and the United States, especially with the secret government stuff. And it's kind of scary. You wonder what's going on.
Yeah, we all wonder. MIB, Men in Black. I mean, it's. Did you ever encounter anything that would match the description of a classical Men in Black encounter?
No, it's probably safe that didn't happen because we tried to take one. I'd try to knock one out and take him. I'd handcuff him, take him, jump him, something. Because the description of Men in Black are more like ETs dressed up like, government officials than... I mean, we've dealt with the government officials. I've got video of somebody cutting our surveillance. We have surveillance on the house. I've got, when I was beaten up, we get this stuff all the time. If somebody like a Men in Black came up and tried to threaten me, the first thing we'd do is we'd try to take him down. In a heartbeat. I wouldn't blink an eye. I'd attack him right there just to try to hold him, just so I had proof.
That's an interesting approach. I mean, as I said, there's a couple of photographers that live in Knittelfeld that also have a lot of encounters. They also witnessed Man in Black, or at least a man in black that would fit this common description. And they said that he was behaving as if he would be a robot. I mean, they had the impression that this is that this is not a real being, but a robot.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. Can
you confirm that?
I've had incidences where I've heard that. I don't know if that's true or not. I've heard that from lots of people. I have had incidences where, a vehicle, an unmarked vehicle, was outside our house and a guy was taking a picture. I'm the type of person that I'm very aggressive when it comes to this. If somebody's trying to take a picture of me, I'll chase after them. And I won't stop usually. So they don't really like to do that too much anymore because they've experienced that. The one time that I got shot at was, I think, because I went after this guy who was in a white unmarked vehicle taking a picture. And I kept going out there chasing after him. He'd come back, and I'd chase after him again. Eventually, a bullet whizzed by my ear and almost got me right in the head.
And that persuaded you to drop this specific...
Well, they never came back after that. We have black helicopters harass us too, and I've got tons of video of these things. The Men in Black I've never really experienced, but I don't think they'd feel safe trying to approach us.
So
really, because scared or not, I'd try to tackle them. I really would.
So you had encounters with people from this, community that wants to keep the secret, as you assume, but not with a classical Man in Black, as I understand.
I don't think so. And I'm assuming that's what they are. They're trying to keep this a secret. I don't know for sure. I'm just...
I'm just speculating.
The way it is.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. It's all just. I mean, this whole field is a lot of speculation. Now, you are one of the very few. I don't know if anyone managed to do that, or we have to say allegedly managed to do that. You made this video of this being, which can be viewed on your website, and again I recommend it to everyone to have a look at it who listens to this right now, because unless you have seen that, I think no one can really understand what we are talking here today, because either you made this thing yourself, which, well, okay, people could argue you want to sell books, or you just did exactly what you say you did, which I personally believe, otherwise I wouldn't do this interview, that you put this camera over there because this being, as I understand it, has been seen on this evening running around in the house several times, and then you just followed.
No. What happened? Let me backtrack.
Yeah.
There a little bit. first of all, nobody in their right mind would try to make up a story like this, because the kind of attention that I'm getting is not always positive.
I can
Nobody
imagine
wants
that.
to be known as the crazy guy that sees UFOs. That's how society looks at this right now. We've been taught by the government, by the powers to be, that this should be looked at as faked and ridiculed to people. They've done a very good job of getting people to believe that this should be ridiculed, which is sad because millions of people are going through this kind of stuff. And I am not the only one that videotapes these things. I just am very outspoken about this. What happened in this particular case, I got married, moved to Nebraska to be with my wife and my stepkids. We were living in a town called Kearney, Nebraska, which is, a big town. University of Nebraska is right there. And I have twin stepdaughters that were very young teenagers at the time. And I was watching TV. I got up to go, it was pretty late at night, I got up to go get a glass of water, and I see movement outside of one of the windows. And the first thing I thought is, oh my goodness, we have a peeping Tom trying to see my pretty stepdaughters. This went on literally for months. I called the police. I let the neighbors know. I'd see movement out of the windows. I see somebody looking in the window. I'd run outside. I could never catch this guy. It got so bad that I set up little traps like twigs and sticks and noisemakers and anything I could think of. So if anybody stepped out, from, to look in one of the windows, I had a bat by the door, and I was going to, a club, and I was going to try to catch this guy. Well, one of the researchers involved in my case said, hey, look, the police aren't going to help you because it's a small town. They don't really care. Why don't you, next time you see movement outside of one of your windows, set up a video camera. You have a video camera that has night shot on it, infrared. Set it up, point it toward that window, and walk away. That's what I did. I set it up. I got it, quickly set it up, turned off the lights, set it up, and I pointed it toward that window. And I pretended like I was going to bed. Instead, I went to the bathroom. I was sitting at the edge of the bathtub reading a magazine because I really wanted to catch this guy. I wanted to call the cops and catch this guy. Well, I saw two very, very bright flashes of lights, and you'll see that on the video. And after the second flash of light, about 10 minutes, 10 minutes or so, I look out, maybe less than that. I look out, and I see this head pop down. It's like, oh, I got the son of a gun. I look outside the window, and this is what's really funny, and my wife thinks this part is the funniest part. I see what I thought was a little child running toward my backyard, and it was very bright out, like it was a full moon. Unfortunately, it wasn't a full moon, so I don't know why it was so bright out, but it was bright enough to see this thing. And it seemed to sense me, and it stopped, and it looked back at me, and I got to tell you, its eyes were not normal. And you can see in the video, it scared the heck out of me. In fact, first thing I did was I ran upstairs to get my wife because I was terrified, like my wife could protect me, but it freaked me out that bad. And when I looked on the video, I was really surprised what I found, because what I found wasn't a human at all. And if it was, could it have been a guy using some kind of mask? That's a possibility, but I know what I saw running away.
So you saw the same being that looked like this being on your video footage. You saw the same being running away, because you come into this room and you look over there. There's this door with the glass window in it where the being looked through. I mean, people have to look at the video.
It's a glass window in our living room.
People have to look at the video to know what we're talking about. Then you come in. There are those two flashes that can be seen. They're not really well caught on camera, but you can see the picture.
They're very, very fast and extremely bright.
Very fast, yeah. But you see two times flickering, actually. That's what was my impression. And then you come in and you peep over this window, and I mean, you really jump back like, oh my God, what's that? And I really had to say, that's the reaction that I would have. I would like jump back like a, I don't know. And then
skeptics, they really come down on me. The skeptics do, and I've had people say, well, these beings, if they're so intelligent, they come, thousands, millions of light years. Why would they look in your window?
Exactly.
Like, how should I know? I don't know.
That's a very good question, but how should we know? As you say, But your reaction, I mean,
them.
it's for me, this looks kind of natural. I mean, at least you're a brilliant actor. But, you know, I mean, I think that was a genuine reaction on something like that.
How could anybody act this stuff?
Yeah.
Why would anybody want to? You know, a lot of people, and again, the debunkers and the skeptics will say, you're doing this for money. Trust me, I'm extremely poor. You don't make a lot of money. Nobody in this field makes a lot of money.
I know.
Nobody.
That's an interesting point you bring up. I mean, very often, I mean, with almost anyone who says anything about UFOs, there are people that say, oh, it's just in it for the money. Even if those people don't make a dime with this. Not, you know, they still this argument comes up. But all right, I mean, and even if you would make money with it, I can only say, well, I mean, you went through a lot of shit, and you, if
why not make money?
Yeah, no, I certainly wouldn't have any problem with anyone making money if he's truly telling.
It's on my website. People can see it for themselves. I mean, why would I put it out there for free if I want to? You know, it doesn't make sense.
I can only praise you for having the guts to come out with this, because, I mean, doing this, experiencing this, and then going out, I mean, telling your friend is one thing, but telling the world is really another thing. So, I mean, I'm surely glad that there are people like you who dare to speak about it. And, well, there has been this polygraph or this lie detector test that we should address at this point, of course. As I understand it, it was put up by a very big radio show in the United States that I personally really love to listen to. But you failed, so the polygraph test, I think that's
Well, technically I didn't fail, and I'll explain why. I approached... it's a show called Coast to Coast, and I know Art Bell fairly well. I've been on Art Bell when Art Bell was in charge of Coast to Coast. I've been on Coast to Coast quite a few times, and I approached Coast to Coast to do a polygraph test. I had nothing to hide. I wanted the polygraph test. It was my idea. It was my thought in the first place. Very well documented. I can prove it all. I approached Coast to Coast, and this new guy named George Norrie said, oh, yeah, we'll take it over. You know, at first they said no, and then all of a sudden they came back and said, out of nowhere, yeah, we'll do it, which I kind of was a little confused there for a while. Well, I agreed to do it because I couldn't afford to have it done myself, so they did the polygraph test. Well, what's weird about this polygraph test, it was done completely different than any polygraph test I'd ever heard of. The guy told me that I have to answer yes or no, and he told me the question he was going to ask me. He was going to ask me, is the video is the alien in the window video faked? It's like, I don't know for sure. I mean, I still have concerns that could it be a mask? Could it be some guy playing a joke on me? Even though I saw the alien run away, I didn't know for sure. I said, can you ask me, did I fake the alien in the window? He said, no, I can't. I have to ask you, is the alien in the window faked? I said, well, what am I supposed to do? I can't answer yes or no to that because I don't know. So he convinced me to answer, no. And he asked me the same question on a polygraph multiple times. And then I'd look at it, and he'd mark it off pass. I remember he marked on his little thing pass. Then he marked pass. Then he marked it pass. And then I looked down at the very last one. I don't know if I coughed or whatever, but he marked it failed. It's like, okay, it's over with. And I said, well, so did I pass? And I assumed I did. He said, no, you failed. It's like, huh? I was totally confused and I was beside myself. How could this possibly be? Well, the radio show got a hold of this, and they said, Stan Romanek lied about this, and he failed this, and he faked the whole thing. It's like, wait a minute. What in the world's going on here? Suddenly, we got an email from a couple witnesses that actually know or had talked to this polygraph guy, the guy who performed the polygraph test, and they said that this guy admitted to them that he purposely rigged the whole thing so I would fail. And that he wanted to stop the blasphemer from, I guess this guy was very religious, and he, as he put it, he wanted to stop the blasphemer. So, and it's all documented. Mm. That's exactly how it happened. And the interesting thing is this George Norrie guy, I didn't know him very well. My attorney got a hold of him, or tried to get a hold of him. I tried to get a hold of him. He refuses to contact me back. He refuses to talk about what had happened with, these witnesses coming forward that, this all was rigged. And they won't talk to him. They won't talk to us. They refuse to talk to us. So I'm starting to wonder what's going on here. It's just, that's just part of what I have to go through.
Well, I think it's difficult to say. And I mean, so this polygraph test was arranged for by the show?
It was. I asked for it myself. I wanted it done. I approached them. I actually approached Art Bell, but Art Bell doesn't do the show anymore. So eventually, I got this weird, mysterious call from the producers from George Norrie, and they said yes, and they arranged the whole thing. So it makes me wonder why, George Norrie did what he did.
We don't really find out what happened and how it got to be the way it all played out.
It could be the
understand.
Examiner. It could be the lie detector test guy. I don't know. But it's fishy that George Norrie won't contact me. Yes. We've tried multiple times. He just hangs up the phone. Why?
Well, because maybe this is a tainted subject for him because, it's I'm sure it's quite difficult for him because he I'm sure also got under attack as well, and I think it's quite difficult to then say, well, he failed the polygraph test, but I don't care, because once he did it, he might have got it.
Why don't they do another one? Why won't they do another one to prove? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's difficult. But anyway, a polygraph test is not any accepted proof in front of a court anyway. So
you're right.
I mean, the thing is, if someone doesn't,
definitely flawed.
Well, I mean, I can only take your word for it, or I can accept your position that you have on that, which I of course do. But the baseline is a polygraph test wouldn't convince anyone who is not willing to believe your story anyway. I mean, if you look at that video, and I mean, I'm dealing with this for 15 years maybe now, so. It didn't surprise me that much. It also didn't surprise me that this being behaves in this way, because that's almost what I expected. I mean, what do you expect anyway? But someone who doesn't believe your story, he won't be convinced by a polygraph test or by the Virgin Mary coming down from heaven and saying, this man told the truth. I mean, it's... So let's say, I mean, You didn't pass this polygraph or this lie detector test. It might be an indication for something, but there are so many variables here that it's simply, I would say, not really conclusive. And
that's just one small piece. My story. I mean, I've got stuff way better than that. I mean, I got video evidence that. It's way better than that.
That would be my next.
Scientists are looking at right now.
That would be my next question. So this little video that was almost shown on CNN, which is also quite interesting because you were on air with Larry King, but you talked about the video, but the people that were investigating the video didn't want you to show the video, which in my opinion brought you into a very difficult position during this show on CNN on Larry King. But so you say there is more footage and that this video is by far not the best footage?
No, there's amazing stuff out there. What people need to understand, again, my case is different because most of the stuff that happens when a lot of people are around. They have video cameras with them. Some of the best footage is from other people. Some of the best footage is from surveillance cameras the scientists put up. You cannot really, I suppose you can, but it's extremely hard to fake surveillance video because the equipment they use is made specifically to use in the court of law So if something happens, let's say, somebody comes in and steals something, you could use that. So you can't fake it. It's really tough to do. And, that's really what makes this case so different. I keep trying to tell people that. It's not just that one video, is just a very minuscule thing of all the stuff that I have.
And there is also, I think, a video online that shows the reactions of other people to a sighting that you just have, as I understand it, yeah?
Yeah, and see, that's it. That's how it is. I mean, I've had, producers for, NBC, main producers for NBC World News that were involved that saw stuff happen. I have these scientists that come down and stuff happens. I have tons of witnesses. I have witnesses that watch my van a UFO came down in the middle of, a suburb of Denver, Colorado, during rush hour, beamed my van as I was going through a stoplight. There were tons of cars around. There are people, having a party at this park that this happened right next to. It flew over them, flew over everybody. I mean, this stuff, it constantly happens.
And can you tell us a little bit what is on the footage that the public apparently hasn't seen so far?
I'll give you a little hint. I thought my stepson was playing a joke. I saw a little figure running naked in my kitchen. Went to go find it, couldn't find it. I saw something outside of the sliding glass window, got my camcorder, videotaped it. There were 3 flashes of light, real bright flashes of light as I was trying to find this thing. And I woke up on the floor 45 minutes later, not remembering that I'd seen anything other than the flashes of light. The only thing that helped me remember was what I caught on video. That's one of them.
All right. So footage in this price class, so to say, is if people would look at this, or people that have looked at it, you said scientists are looking at it. That also was the case with the alien video that is now online. Which scientists are these? Can you tell us any names or any organizations?
Well, I'm not sure. They're coming forward themselves. Dr. Claude Swanson's one of them. There's Jerry, this guy named Jerry. I forget. There's so many people. Honestly, if I have to go through, I have to get a list to read them off. But it's going to all come out real soon. See, what we're doing is I want to make sure there is no doubt. When it comes to analyzing the video, a lot of the debunkers say, well, it's computer generated. They have proof that it's not. They have proof that it's all in camera. There's special programs. I'll tell you if anybody messed with the video and used a computer, there's special codes that are used that'll show up on the video. All this stuff is in camera. There's, scientific analysis that's been done on a bunch of this stuff that is just quite amazing. Can I talk about who these scientists are? Well, I could if I got there okay, but I don't remember some of them, and I want to make sure, they're coming out in their own time. I don't want to force the issue because I don't want them to go away.
For sure, no.
So it's going to happen real soon, though.
Any time frame?
Yeah, there's a company called Lionsgate that's going to put this in a documentary. Well, there's a company, we're working with a group called Lionsgate, which is a production company that's going to put this in a documentary for everybody to see. I believe it's going to be a TV documentary. I'm not sure. Am I going to make any money off of it? Gee, that would be nice, but probably not.
And can you give us a little bit of a glimpse into what findings will be discussed in this upcoming revelations? I mean, what did those scientists find? Can you give us the gist of?
Oh, they found proof that this is real. This is a real phenomenon. They found, for instance, I've come back. I had my knee fixed. I had a torn anterior cruciate ligament in my knee, and I was abducted, and they fixed my knee. I have x-rays and all that other stuff, and I came back miraculously healed overnight, and it completely flipped out the doctors. They can't explain it. things are coming out, scientific analysis of these circles that I woke up in during my abduction in the yard, and they find these, tons of these microscopic meteorite particles in them, and the only way that can happen is if something comes from outer space and deposits it there. From what I understand, a meteor breaks up, or something breaks up in the atmosphere, and there's this dust up in our what they call the ionosphere, and it just is up there, this cloud that kind of surrounds the Earth of all these meteorite particles. And the only way it comes down to Earth is if something actually comes through the ionosphere. Like, for instance, the space shuttle is out doing its thing, it comes back down, and it has all this dust all over it from these meteorite particles. Well, they found tons of this polarized meteorite particles in these circles in our yard. And within, a few hours, the grass is completely dead, and, they show why it's doing what it's doing and what could have caused it, and why the EMF meters and the compasses go crazy in these things. And there's all kinds of stuff that'll be in this documentary. And
so once again, the time frame, but is not very...
Hopefully 2011.
2011. All right.
That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that will be very fascinating, and I hope we can then maybe talk again when this comes out, although you might be very busy then. But, this looks like you really want to get out proof there into the public that cannot be ignored anymore.
Well, me and a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
I want to be able to reach people, talking to people that already believe. Again, it's like talking to the choir. I want to reach people who are like me that didn't believe, and let them know you don't have to be afraid. That's why people are so skeptical, because they have this vision of what reality is like. I call it a reality bubble. And when anything threatens to pop that bubble, they get very scared, very frightened. But honestly, it's the best thing that could have happened to me, because now I get to look outside the box, and it's marvelous. To think, I think the human race is lonely, and to know that we have neighbors, I think will change everything. I think it's beautiful.
But a lot of people think that those neighbors might not be the fuzzy little beings that just want to help humanity, and there are also a lot of indications. So what if there are good reasons for keeping all this a secret?
What if there's not? It doesn't matter if they're good or bad, and I honestly believe there's good and bad up there just like there's good and bad here. To me, it seems like we're kind of caught in the middle of a war over this planet. There are things that want to help us and things that don't. Either way, it doesn't matter. We need to know the human race has a right to know what we're up against. We have a right. We have a right. It used to be that, when I first started having these experiences, and I came to the conclusion that it was being kept quiet by the government or whoever, I couldn't understand why. And at first I thought, well, maybe it is for the good of mankind to not know what's really going on. But then I started realizing that's not the case at all. It's really the fact that these black ops or black government projects or whoever they are, big business, especially like the oil companies, the oil, people, don't want to lose control. That's all it is. They have an invested interest in some of the technology that's been back engineered from these things. Believe it or not, true, real true. Possibly things like fiber optics, stuff like that. And they don't want us to know about it. They don't want to lose that control. And that's why they try to keep it quiet. I used to think it was for our own good, but I don't believe that anymore.
Well, as you mentioned, fiber optics and also the chip that allegedly was due to back engineering. There are traces of scientific research that is totally human that go back to the 30s and the late 20s, for example, in the case of the chip. So I don't think that those things are back engineered, because the paper trail of human development is there. And also, if you think of optic fibers, it's a great thing, but it's not that advanced. I mean, it's maybe, but
no,
who knows?
But I'm sure, I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
Am I sure that's one of the things that is back engineered? No.
Yeah.
But I'm just using that as an example. There's other things that, there's technologies we don't even know about that, they don't want us. Let's say an advanced intelligence comes down and has the ability to use zero-point energy for, energy resource. It doesn't pollute the atmosphere. It doesn't take anything. You can get it free. You can utilize it free. What's that going to do to the oil industry?
Yeah,
Let's face it, they're the biggest.
That's about
biggest crooks there is.
Yeah, well, that's surely one of the, for me, most plausible theories about why this could be kept a secret. But coming towards the end of our conversation here, the mutilations, animal mutilations, for example, that happened. I mean, Linda Howe covered them extensively at the early 80s, Strange Harvest, and she got a national Emmy award for her work. And there have been a lot of other researchers doing research in this regard. And animal mutilations that seem to be pretty well connected to the UFO phenomenon, at least regarding eyewitness accounts, etc. They are quite a spooky thing. But then there is the very raw case of alleged human mutilations. Have you ever heard of that?
I have, in South America especially. But, what could that be? Again, it's speculation. For all I know, that could be humans trying to make it look like aliens. It could be aliens. There are bad, like I said, I'm sure there are bad and good up there just like there's good and bad here. The question is, how are we going to know who's good or bad? That's the real question.
Yeah, that's, I think, where exopolitics comes into play, but that's also a field still in its infancy. Especially since there is no real training ground, I mean, for politics you need someone to make politics with. But these beings, I mean, and this is going on. How long do you think that this is going on?
Oh, geez, thousands of years, if not millions of years. I mean, there's a possibility that maybe we're an experiment from these things. Who knows? I don't know.
You say things, and if we are experiments of these things, then are we things too? I mean, it brings up very, very fundamental questions about who we are, where we come from, and of course, eventually, where do we go? So, I'm not sure if once we really find out if this day ever comes, I surely hope it would come because I'm a very curious person, but if this day ever comes, I think we will all be surprised. I mean, everyone. I mean, you will be surprised. I surely will be surprised, and everyone I know will be surprised. And I think no one will really be, or maybe very, very few people right now know what this is. And I keep it in a quite broad term now again, because, I mean, how can we be sure that that these are aliens that visitors from other worlds that interact with us? Can we be sure about this, in your opinion? Or
no, there are rumors that some of these aliens are us from the future. Like thousands of years in the future. There are all kinds of theories, and I always tell people, I say, I've been through a lot with these experiences, and I've learned a lot. And I always come across people who say they are experts. Well, I'm an expert, and I know what's going on, and listen to me. Whenever you run into people like that, run away. Don't listen to them, because I can tell you, the more I learn, the less I know. And the more, honestly, I feel stupid, more so now than I ever have. Granted, I'm learning exponentially, and I get to, look outside the box, but there's so much stuff going on. How are we ever really going to know, You worked with Jeff Packman. Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about Mr. Packman, what he's doing and what he tried to achieve? Well,
I'm lucky. I have some really amazing people involved with me. One of the people, ex-Naval Intelligence, is also heavily into politics locally. And he was friends with Jeff Peckman, and he conned Jeff. Jeff didn't really know much about the UFO thing, but he invited him to come to one of my presentations, and I present all over the country and soon to be all over the world. And he was just absolutely blown away by what he saw. And he says, if this was really going on, why, I can't believe it, because the government would tell people about it. And we had to explain to him that, no, it's being kept a secret for whatever reason. And he didn't believe us at first until he started doing his own research. And he was dumbfounded as to what he found. And so he said, we got to do something. The government's not going to do anything, so we got to do something from the grassroots up. So they started this campaign to start the Denver Extraterrestrial Initiative. It's a local initiative to get people to understand that, there are things out there and we need to deal with it accordingly. Be it bad or good, we have to come up with a strategy how to deal with this abduction phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon, and the whole thing. And they were going to do that at the local government level. Well, all kinds of things started happening. He came to me, he says, well, do you have any evidence? And I said, yes. And he goes, well, what can I use? And I didn't really want him to use much because I wasn't really sure, the evidence wasn't really looked at very closely. But they conned me into using this one little piece of, the ET in the window. And that's how that all got started, and that's how Jeff Peckman got started, and it reached all over the world, this one little video. And the ridicule that I've gotten for that video by the skeptics and the debunkers, and the threats that I've gotten because of that video is amazing.
And so where did this initiative then, is it still going on? Is Jeff still working on?
Well, what happened was he had a lot of people trying to stop this thing underground, trying to stop it. People messed with we had to get signatures, and suddenly the city lost some of the signatures mysteriously and all this other stuff. And he actually got it to pass to get voted for. And we were for sure thinking it would pass, but some mysterious stuff happened and it didn't pass. But it got the world's attention. And they're going to try it again differently and try to get it to pass. There was one local group that has this, they like to try to debunk everything. That's what they do to get notoriety. They like to ride people's shirt tails to get notoriety. And they'll debunk everything just so they can get a big name for themselves. And they kept trying to tell people that if they voted for this, that voters would have to spend millions of dollars, which was an absolute lie, because this particular initiative was, paid for by grants and had nothing to do with that. But that's one of the reasons we think it didn't pass. But there were, millions of people that really wanted this to pass. Quite amazing, actually.
Just so I get it correctly, was this a federal initiative that Jeff Peckman tried to push, or was it? It was just a local Denver government initiative. So Denver, Colorado, the state would proceed on this, but not Congress.
Not now, it won't. But interestingly enough, now New York's going to try to have this initiative. There are other states and actually other countries that are going to try to do this stuff. Try to get their government to do this. So,
New York just had an interesting sighting this year. Does that have any? Yeah. But I assume that has nothing to do with this initiative that they're trying to do there now?
No, I don't think so. Oddly enough, a general, I think it was a general, maybe it was an admiral, I don't remember, but he said that this sighting was going to happen, and it did. So kind of interesting story about that. And it's interesting times, that's for sure.
Yes, it was kind of predicted. I mean, he predicted it to be worldwide, etc. And it was only really confirmed over New York, I think. But anyway, it was an interesting story, at least. I mean, if you look at all of this, the situation seems to be very complex, very complicated. There are, as you said, different races, different groups of beings involved. Do you have any idea how many groups there are out there?
There's bazillions of stars. I mean, just in our universe, just in our galaxy, there's what they estimate like 500 billion stars in our universe.
The numbers,
in our galaxy alone.
The numbers vary, but yes, in the hundreds of billions of stars, yeah.
And they're finding out that, now NASA is saying that a lot of them have planetary systems, which means that they're probably full of all kinds of life. And who knows how many there really are, and who knows how many are visiting us. From what I understand, from what I'm getting from my abduction experiences, is that the human race is at a crossroads right now. Every emerging race has to go through this initiation. We either become enlightened and join the neighborhood, or we self-destruct because we're too evil or too clumsy or whatever. We now have nuclear weapons, which scare the heck out of. They don't want, crazy monkeys with nuclear weapons out in their neighborhood to destroy them. So I'm sure unless we become enlightened, they're not going to let us out into space. We're only going to be able to go, just our solar system. That's it. But we are at a crossroads right now. We either make it or we don't. It's pretty scary, though, because, the military, all these governments are making these underground military facilities and military cities, and, the United States are making all these prison camps all over the place, and it's really happening. I mean, I can just drive maybe 3 hours to go visit a prison camp that's being built, and nobody knows why. Some secret government thing that's going on. If we can make it past this, and I think we are actually going to get some help, then we'll be fine. Then we'll be able to join the neighborhood. Then we'll be able to understand that, we have responsibilities, and we'll be able to be part of that. We'll have technology where there won't be a lot of illness anymore, and there won't be, but it's going to be a tough, the system right now is broken. You can't fix it. And it seems like when it comes to the world, the inmates are running the sanitarium. So you have to replace it. And I think that's what we're in for coming up. I think it's going to be a changing of the system, and it's going to be tough going for a while. But once it's changed, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be wonderful.
Yes, and I couldn't agree more. If we could, make it out there, if we could get over this, whatever is happening right now, and start to realize that there is a whole universe for us to explore in peace, then I really think this would also be very inspiring to everyone. And I don't think there would be, there will always be people, who get into trouble. I think that won't change in the future. And as you say, also those beings out there, there are good and bad ones. But it would be very, very interesting and fantastic if we could make it over that hurdle and really start to relate to whoever is out there.
Yeah, wouldn't it be? And people need to understand there is a small group of bad people running the world right now. A small group, the wealthy elite. And I'm not really into conspiracy stuff. I've just experienced it for myself. There are some good people out there and there are some bad people, but the bad people, it's a small amount of bad people that control a lot of stuff. We don't need to let that happen. We have the choice, and it's about global consciousness. Look, I honestly believe there is a God. I believe we're part of that. And whatever God is, that oneness, that amazing oneness that is part of everything, we're part of that. Everything in this universe is connected. I believe that with every inch of my being. I believe that, including the ETs, including what's out there. So, it's time for the human race to grow up. It's time for us to respect ourselves. It's time to stop this bigotry and this war. The only reason wars are ever started is because of money. Let's face it, the Gulf War was started because of oil. That's it. That's all there was. There was nothing else. We need to stop it. We need to grow up now. The human race is at stake.
Well, yes, I guess so. I mean, we are at the crossroads now. I totally agree on that. And are there any recent encounters? I mean, anything that happened recently that was interesting in conjunction with this whole big picture in your life?
Other than my neighbor, it's actually been somewhat quiet. Other than a few weeks ago, my neighbor seeing the E.T. looking at her, staring at her over our fence and scaring the heck out of her. Nothing real major. You know, a few small things, but, you know, I'm sure if people that don't know us very well ever came to our house and hung out for a week or so, it'd probably scare the heck out of them. What's normal to us probably isn't normal to a lot of people,
yeah. So apart from the usual alien encounters in your backyard, there was nothing special, yeah?
Nothing real special.
All right. I mean, this really reminds me of Knittelfeld again. They also had encounters in their backyard, and a being suddenly jumping up and running away, and things like that happened to them. So this seems to be, it is a global.
It happens to a lot of people.
It is a global phenomena, and I can confirm that I hear different, similar stories from someone who just lives around the corner here in Styria, which is a district of Austria, a province of Austria. Are there any future plans? I mean, of course there are future plans, but what is it that you plan in the near future? Now, there is apparently this big thing coming up where you present new footage that has been examined by these scientists that you work with.
Well, I'm a professional speaker, I guess you might say that. I do presentations all over. You know, I'm looking forward. I was supposed to go tour South America and Mexico, but that's going to have to wait till early 2012. I'm doing a big, there's going to be a movie about my story, documentary movie about my story. They're in production right now. I'm writing my second book. I have my first book, which gives a lot more detail to my story than I can ever have time even talking on the radio. I mean, literally, I could do probably a week's worth of talking straight and not cover everything. And, you know, it just continues. As stuff continue, I continue. So it's about getting the word out.
It's about getting the word out. When you sometimes, you know, lay awake at night in your bed, I mean, do you wish that all of this had never happened to you? I mean, did you know what you were going into when you started to picking up this work to getting to the gist of this phenomenon?
That's a good question. I did at first. I mean, there are parts of this that I'm going through that I wished would stop. But, you know, would I do it again? Yeah, I would. I mean, like I said, I've learned exponentially. I know what I want to do when I grow up, and it's to help the human race. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything more. I mean, I'll continue to do this as long as I can. I really will. And if not me, then somebody else will take over, you know, but there's a reason for it. And I want to try to help. That's really, from the bottom of my heart, I want to try to help in whatever bizarre way that I can, get people to understand that, hey, look, there's something out there. Pay attention.
Well, I mean, you know, if this is really out there, and let's say there are some indications that could well be. So if this is really out there, then a lot of people are going to need a lot of help to get this into their head and to get around it, you know, to get over it.
Absolutely. That's where I come in.
I guess people like you who start talking about this thing now and who wouldn't shut up, even though they get ridiculed and whatever, you might well be doing a very important job, you know. If this doesn't ever come out, and then, well, okay, then history will forget about it. But I wonder, I mean, it has been going on for so long. I mean, there is even a chance that it's never
But there is a difference. There is. I mean, I don't believe that it won't come out. I think it's going to come out soon. Look, never before has most of the countries in the world come out and said this is real, including the Vatican. I mean, I've never heard of that. Things are changing. especially in the United States, most of the cartoon my stepson watches, most of the movies that are out, a lot of even commercials have aliens in them. Everything's aliens everywhere. Aliens and ghosts, especially aliens. There's a reason for that. I believe that, the governments are finally understanding that they're being overwhelmed and they finally need to let this out. And for whatever reason, let's hope, and there are theories, especially in the United States, that the government wants to use this to scare people into more control. They want to have more control. So they're going to say, aliens are real and they're here to hurt everybody and kill everybody so we can control you. I mean, let's face it, that's what they did with 9/11. Everybody knows, most people know 9/11 is probably an inside job. And, they use it for control. They got all kinds of stuff out of it. They've got a new security agency, Homeland Security, which is, God, they've got to be the most evil thing ever. But I've got hopes that it's not going to be that way. To me, I've got a feeling things are going to change. I got a feeling the bad guys are going to lose finally.
Well, let's hope so. And we will be here to find out, I guess, because I also think that it might be, getting to a close here. But as I said, it could be going on for another decade, for another 100 years. Yeah. We will find out.
Nobody knows unless it's happened.
Nobody knows unless it finally happens. And then I think we will all be quite in shock and awe about what is really going on here. In any case, I think you're doing a great job. There's not a lot of people who are willing to share their footage and their experiences so openly as you're doing. I hope that indeed next year we will see new footage from you which has gone through the hands of the scientists you work with, and where also analysis is available, so we not just look at the thing and believe it or not, but where we can actually learn something about the background of it and why people think that it's genuine proof, etc., etc. And of course your upcoming book, a lot of work to write a book, I guess, especially on a subject like that where you have to choose your words carefully, I assume.
Especially being dyslexic like I am.
Oh yeah,
it's really.
In any case, I hope that won't hold you up of publishing further information about the subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Stan, for your time. And yeah, I would be pleased to continue this conversation maybe next year sometime when maybe even
Absolutely.
new footage is available.
You bet.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sie hörten eine weitere Ausgabe von Crop FM Spezial. Diesmal mit dem Contactee Stan Romanek. Im Archiv finden sich neben dem Crop FM Spenden-Button auch hunderte von weiteren Sendungen zum freien Download, darunter Dutzende Ausgaben rund ums Thema unidentifizierter Flugobjekte und Exopolitik. Alles das und mehr auf der Website von Crop FM www.cropfm.at. Ich danke fürs Zuhören und fürs Interesse. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Macht es gut. never know.